Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle the immense 5,000-year story of Egypt, from its very first god kings all the way to its modern-day call for people power.
All right, so let's jump right in by breaking down an image we all think we know. You see it everywhere, right? Camels lounging by the pyramids. But here's the thing. That picture is just plain wrong. Camels weren't really a thing in Egypt until thousands of years after the pyramids were built. It's kind of the perfect example of how much we get wrong about this incredible civilization.
So to get to the real story, we need to rewind. I'm talking way, way back, thousands of years before the pyramids were even a glimmer in someone's eye. We're going back to see how this civilization, which feels like it's been around forever, actually got its start.
You know, the story doesn't start with these huge monuments. It starts with whispers, with clues. We're talking 19,000 years ago. Hunter-gatherers were carving images of wild cattle into rock. Fast forward a few millennia, and around 6,000 BCE, you start to see the first farming communities. It was this long, slow burn that finally led to a huge moment around 3100 BCE. A king, his name was Narmer, he unites the two lands of Egypt, and boom, he creates the world's very first nation-state. And it's not long after that that the first pyramid starts to rise from the sand.
And that moment, that incredible act of unification, it wasn't just lost to history, it's actually captured on this one amazing artifact, the Narmer Palette. Think of it as Egypt's birth certificate. It's the earliest historical document we have, and it literally laid out the blueprint for what it meant to be a pharaoh.
Now, this is what's so cool about this thing. It's not just a pretty carving. This one object sets up a whole visual language of power. First, you get the big idea. The king isn't just a ruler, he's a god at the very top of everything. Then you get the symbols, the props of kingship, right? The fake beard, the bull's tail, these become standard issue for pharaohs for centuries. You also get that iconic smiting pose, the king about to crush his enemy. That image was so powerful, they kept using it for 3,000 years. And, get this, it even has some of the world's very first writing on it. Incredible.
Okay, so with that blueprint for what a king should be all locked in, Egypt launches into its most ambitious era. And its power, which lasted for so long, was really built on two unshakable foundations.
First up, geography. The ancient historian Herodotus totally nailed it when he said, Egypt is the gift of the Nile. I mean, think about it. The river flooded so predictably every single year that it created this incredibly rich, fertile land. That made Egypt an agricultural superpower, able to feed a huge organized population.
And the second foundation? It was a powerful, shared belief system. You had over 1 million people, all united by this absolute conviction in the divine power of their king, and this certainty that there was an afterlife. That belief, right there, was the ideological engine that built the pyramids.
But of course, no golden age lasts forever, right? After thousands of years of ruling themselves, Egypt's incredible power and wealth basically put a giant target on its back for new, rising empires.
And the arrival of Rome, well, that changed everything for Egypt. In 30 BCE, after the death of the very last pharaoh, the famous Cleopatra, Egypt was conquered. The conqueror? A guy named Octavian, who you might know better as Rome's first emperor, Augustus.
But here's the thing. Rome didn't treat Egypt like just another conquered territory. Oh no. It was so important, so rich, that they didn't hand it over to the Senate to govern. Instead, it was treated like the emperor's own personal property, his private estate kept under his direct and total control. See, Rome didn't care about the glory of conquering Egypt as much as it cared about its stuff. Egypt became the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, supplying about 1/3 of all the grain for the city of Rome. And to keep that grain flowing, the Romans did something smart. They just kept the old Egyptian bureaucracy running. So for the average farmer whose life was run by the rhythm of the Nile, not much really changed. Just the name of the guy at the very top.
All right, now we're going to jump way forward in time. After the Romans, Egypt was a key part of the Arab and then the Ottoman empires for more than 1,000 years. By the 19th century, a new monarchy takes hold, but that gets overthrown by a military coup in 1952. And that really sets the stage for a new era, an era of powerful presidents and a new kind of top-down rule.
So this long history of one person at the top, it brings up a really interesting question for our time. What happens when thousands of years of pharaohs, emperors, and presidents slams into the social pressures of the 21st century? Well, we got our answer in 2011.
The protesters who flooded Tahrir Square, their demands weren't just about politics. It all came together around this one powerful, deeply human concept, Karama, which means dignity. And dignity meant everything: your personal worth, a chance to make a living, political freedom, and, maybe most importantly, a future for your kids.
And the revolution of 2011, it didn't just happen overnight. It was like a pressure cooker that had been building for decades. You had economic problems, a huge gap between the rich and poor, and a massive population of young people with no opportunities. The main things people were angry about were massive corruption and police brutality. A few specific events, like the murder of an activist and rigged elections, acted as triggers. But the final spark? That came from watching the successful revolution in Tunisia. That's when Egyptians decided it was their time to take to the streets.
You know, in the middle of all that chaos and uncertainty, researchers who were there found something amazing: a deep sense of hope. When they asked protesters if they were optimistic about the future, every single person they talked to said yes. They were driven by this powerful belief that Egyptians would just not tolerate the abuses of the past anymore.
So, from that very first god-king carved on the Narmer Palette to the modern call for dignity in the streets, the story of Egypt is just this incredible mix of continuity and massive change. And it leaves us with one final big question. After 5,000 years of someone ruling from the top, what on earth is the next chapter in this epic and still unwritten story?